Hello and welcome to Board Now's Cult Film Reviews, and today I will be reviewing the recent film by British director Peter Strickland. He in the past has done such films as Barbarian Sound Studio and also The Duke of Burgundy. So his most recent film was In Fabric, and I will be reviewing that now. I watched it a few days ago at my local picture house, and yeah, I'll get into it. It's a really bizarre, sort of trippy horror movie, basically, and so yeah, this is my first horror or film review in general. I do plan on doing more on the channel in the future, and of course I've done some live streams where I've done live watches of horror films, which have been a lot of fun. But yeah, horror, a big sort of passion of mine. But yeah, this film is very experimental and, as I said, quite surreal, as his films tend to be. Have a really retro sort of feel to it in the aesthetics and the unusual use of sound. It's one of those where it sort of feels kind of artificial, but also based in reality as well. It is like a curious mixture of styles in that way, and yeah, a very distinct atmosphere and tone to it. Whether you love or hate it, it's certainly quite a unique film. Very bizarre, maybe the weirdest film I'll see this year, but it certainly has that going to it where you would have to concede that even if you don't like the film, which I can see it's not going to be for everyone certainly, but you would have to concede that it is very distinct. But yeah, the actual setup is very basic, but yeah, kind of strange. It's about a haunted dress, folks. Yeah, it's about a haunted dress. I'll just say that again and let that sink in. But we have Marianne Baptiste, who's an excellent actress from these shores, and she, at the start of the film, she's picking her life back up after a recent divorce. She lives with her son, who's very moody, very cut off and withdrawn from her. And he has, in a subplot, he has a girlfriend who's a very artsy, kind of like performer. They perform these odd things in their house, and the girlfriend, certainly the mother, is paranoid and the girlfriend doesn't really like her, and again there's this further distance because of the girlfriend being so peculiar and sort of in her own world, very snobby. So that's the setup. So the Marianne Baptiste character is looking up to pick up the pieces of her life, and so she's getting back into dating after a period out of that. And so, to get ready for her dates, she treats herself to this flash nude dress, or this red dress, which she sees in a store, this kind of upmarket sort of store. And immediately, when the film goes into this place and we first see the woman at the counter and the way she behaves, it has this very surreal, off-kilter sort of world to it. She has these particularly witch-like sort of features and talks in peculiar kind of tones and sort of metaphors, and just kind of telegraphs every line, which I think is part of the point. I think it's meant to have this artificial, uneasy sort of feel to it. But yeah, from the moment she enters the store, there's this sense that something isn't quite right. So yeah, she buys this dress, and then things spiral out of control. Things start happening, weird things, like her date starts going wrong. Originally, her first date anyway, it's just this really rude, obnoxious guy who doesn't pay any attention to her, doesn't engage in conversations. He chews in front of her and is really self-centered, and things start going further wrong at home, and she finds out basically about the history of the dress, and the woman who originally wore the dress was killed essentially. So we get a little bit of the backstory from that, and yeah. So that's kind of set up. I mean, in some ways it's quite basic. It's almost B movie type premise. You know, the fact that someone buys a dress. In this case, the dress has a mysterious history, and people start dying. Essentially, people she comes in contact with start dying, or weird things start happening to her and the people around her. I mean, she does get involved with one guy, and there's a particular bond between them. But yeah, there's a really gruesome scene, I should say, scene with a dog actually, which he's kind of drawn to the energy of the dress, and I sort of find any time you see like violence involving a dog, where I mean, whether it's the dog being attacked, or just the dog being really vicious and aggressive and attacking someone, there's just something really uneasy about it. It just feels unnatural in a way, and yeah, it's a really distressing scene actually. So I mean, that's sort of example. But yeah, it's this really peculiar atmosphere. It has this sense of a mystery, but also of the surreal. There's, I think it's sort of lit, and the attire and just the texture of the film has this sort of Argento, Hitchcockian sort of feel. I think the styles are very diverse in it. And I think Marianne Baptiste, now there's a couple of stories actually. There's another story which I'll get onto in a minute, but I think Marianne Baptiste in this film, in this side of the film, half of the film, really holds it together. She really is the glue. I mean, I think there's just something about the way she carries herself which gives like a human face to it, and gives you a character to root for. It's not just this strange abstract film, which some people are going to enjoy. I mean, I enjoyed it personally, but it's good to have a human character to sort of root for. And it's worth saying, as a horror film, it is successful. I think obviously there's a lot of weird stuff going on, but there is at times a really unsettling atmosphere about it. There's some really grueling scenes, I mean, as I just described with the dog. And yeah, it just, I mean, there might be isolation for some. They might struggle to find a way in, but I did go along with it. I was sort of seduced by the world of it. But there's some ideas in here, because what I liked about the film was a lot of the comedy. It's actually a very funny film. And there's some scenes where it's played as just kind of surreal, oddball, and it's somewhere between the two. It's sort of funny, but it's sort of uneasy as well. And then there's some scenes that are just full-on horror, and then there's others which are really satirical and funny. I mean, I think one of the things it's doing is kind of sending up just how cold and isolated the retail environment is, the sort of atmosphere and the way people are treated as sort of machines. And so this plays into it. So the Baptiste character is essentially in retail. She's in one of these sort of high class sort of I think it's a clothes store as well, but certainly one of these high end department stores. And yeah, she has quite a cheesy name badge, not name badge, but a badge where it says I will help you, I will serve you, something like this. And there's these really funny scenes with a couple of like the management team. Julian Barrett plays one of them. You'll know him from a lot of like TV and also indie film comedies. And Steve Omar, I believe the name is, of the other guy, who's been in a lot of kind of low budget horror comedies. He's very good at playing sort of nerdy characters, but he's a really subtle actor. He always manages to strike this balance between, being quite nerdy and sort of oddball, but also having a humanity to him, having a bit of a spark to him, a bit of an edge. He's quite underrated, I think, but yeah, they have these really funny scenes with her where they're sort of picking her up on her work performance, and I mean, there's a scene where they're criticising her handshake, and I mean, it just taps into how absurd the retail industry can be or has become. Ridiculous, petty things like how you shake someone's hand. This idea, it actually makes that much of a difference to the customers, or this idea then it really matters in any meaningful way. And they're sort of picking her up because apparently she when she was leaving one day, she went for a toilet break, a few minutes before the end of her shift. So she didn't just wait till the end of the shift and then go to the toilet or leave. She actually spent the last few minutes of her shift on, going toilet sort of thing, and they were questioning the time. So yeah, really funny scenes, really sharp. They play it really well, both of them. They're just so straight-faced and peculiar. And so I think that's a big theme in the film, the sort of coldness and isolation of retail. But it does become a sort of absurdist sort of comedy. So that's something I really enjoyed, and I thought it was really sort of bang on the money as well. And I could go into, I've gone into spoilers a little bit, but I won't spoil the whole thing. I'll leave a bit of mystery for you guys to sort of discover what actually happens to her. But yeah, it is interesting because, going back to the Baptiste performance, I think, again, she sort of grounds it, and I think she has just this way of delivering lines that really gets the measure of it, and really quite provocative. There's almost like a noir type element to it at times. But I think it is this mixture of styles and these mixtures of tones, and as I said, the fact that bits of it are actually really funny, which I didn't expect. Bits of it are sort of just bizarre, and it is scary as well. I think that's what really makes it work. And it's funny with the sound design, because at times what it does, it's a very subtle use of sound, where I was in the cinema watching it, and it was a reasonably busy screening, and so at times I actually looked around me when I heard chattering, and I thought, well, it can't be people in the cinema, but there was just something so subtle about the sound design, how natural it sounded. Then I actually thought people were chatting in the cinema around me, but it was actually on the film. And I think, again, that's the point that's making, is to do with the paranoia of her, and just the atmosphere in these very dry, cold, places. The fact that she's getting very paranoid because she's starting to be taken over by this dress. And there's this whole mystery about the dress and the previous owner, and the fact that in the store they claim there's only one, and yet in the next story we sort of see it again. But the idea is that it's being passed on, and each time something sort of bad happens to the person who wears it. And I guess that's a very basic metaphor, this idea of maybe being obsessed with looking good, or trying to project a certain image. that isn't really you maybe can have a negative effect. There are consequences, and that, you know, often there is darkness lurking within this pretty sort of package. So I mean, that's a well trod sort of idea which the film again plays with, but you know, it does it quite well. And also, I mean, I think because of the, you know, at times the lush use of colours, it reminded me a bit of Suspiria as well, you know, both the original and the recent remake. But the style, yeah, I think really worked for me. So I will talk a bit about the second part of the film because it is sort of a double header with two stories. And that took me off guard because I forgot going in there was another story. But I think they make it work quite well because of the way they contrast the stories. So in the second story, you have a man who's engaged. He's with his girlfriend, and they've essentially been together for years. I think he says at one point she's the only girl he's been with because they've been together pretty much since they were like, you know, sort of uni age, college age, whatever you want to say. And the girl's actually played by Hayley Squires, who was in Ken Loach's film I, Daniel Blake a few years ago. It was a really good film, and she was really good in that, and she's very good in this as well. But she's playing like the fiance, and they're sort of getting ready for the wedding. But he actually buys the dress for her, and that's how the dress ends up in this story. But yeah, it's an interesting and unsettling opening because, you know, he then is on like a sort of a stag type night out with some mates and also her father, and he's kind of it's this masculine thing where they're sort of forcing him to wear the dress, and they're sort of mocking him and joking about, and so that's kind of how we open with it. But again, it's an interesting contrast because of the fact that the situation is sort of reverse, where in the first film, in the first story, Marianne Baptiste, her character is very isolated and withdrawn, and that's kind of her problem. But in this sense, there's a guy who I think has a lot of people around him, but maybe apart from his girlfriend, they're the wrong sort of people, and he does again feel like a bit of a clog in a machine. But again, there's some really funny satire on that, you know, because often, because he's like a maintenance engineer and always fixing things, and he's there in people's apartment, and he's giving them like the spiel about, you know, these really technical sort of repairs and really mundane, boring sort of stuff that, yeah, just really plain and dull. And again, it's tapping into that modernity, that mundane sort of feel, and I think that's where the film has a very clinical, cold sort of feel to it. And so, yeah, I mean, in some ways it's even funnier than the first story where he spaces out talking about it, and then we cut to a reaction shot and they're spacing out as well. But yeah, there's sort of this morality thing where he's talking to a customer at her place, and he's telling her about, you know, the sort of marriage coming up and the fact that he's never cheated on his girlfriend, and yeah, so the woman is almost trying to seduce him, but at the same time she's saying to him, you know, a story about her ex-husband and how he claimed to have never cheated, and all this, and her message is just basically then every guy cheats in the end. And but it's this strange, again, this bizarre sort of scene where it doesn't play out naturally. It's sort of yeah, she's kind of trying to seduce him in a way through her words and the way she acts. But again, it does have this very unnatural, eerie sort of feel to it. But yeah, it's sort of about entrapment and people entrapped in very mundane sort of roles. But again, playing it for absurdist sort of comedy, and again having that quite eerie sort of horror feel to it. And Hayley Squires is really, really good in it. I mean, you get more of her character as she goes along. It's not just about her and the boyfriend. Weird things start happening to her. Very trippy hallucination sort of moments where she's in the dress shop and she's having these aggressive interactions with customers. And again, it's and she sort of has a couple of scenes with the strange woman who runs the shop, and actually maybe the highlight of the film, because it comes out then the characters have dreams as a result of the dress, really frantic, strange dreams. So it happens in the first story, it happens here, and we see a dream where she's having a baby, which I'm assuming isn't real because as far as I know she isn't pregnant in the film. But she's having a baby, and it sort of comes out, and it's this really dramatic scene because it's in a dream, and the sort of future husband is doing the voiceover, and I can't remember the line, but he says something about it made it, then it was rejecting him, and the baby comes out and gives him the finger, which is just brilliant. That's just genius. I think that got the laugh of the night probably. But yeah, you see, it is a really funny film, which I wasn't expecting. But yeah, again, some really trippy, surreal moments in the store with this woman and with the Hayley Squires character. And again, she's really on point with her delivery, and it's just very likable, but very yeah, I think she makes her character sort of likable and a person to sort of root for, but she has a bit of a bite to her as well. Yeah, it's a well balanced film in that way. It's very bizarre, but I thought it was really brilliant, and I would definitely watch it again, but I will just say it's not for everyone. And that's it. That's In Fabric, which is on a limited release now, and it's really worth giving a go. And I will do other cult film reviews on this channel. I'm planning for Open Your Eyes, maybe the late 90s film, which was remade as Vanilla Sky, which I've not watched for a while, so it's worth revisiting it, and I think I might do a review of that. But that's In Fabric, so if you've not seen it, and if you've got a particular taste for that sort of off-kilter, surreal type horror, then yeah, I'd recommend seeing it. So yeah, coming up on the channel, more streams, more live streams, more film reviews, more retro reviews. I recently started Gilmore Girls. I did the pilot of that, which I think went okay. I've been doing Buffy the Vampire Slayer as well, and yeah, some newer shows like Jessica Jones, for example, which I will return to soon. But for now, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, and leave any comments if you've seen the film below. But thanks for watching.